So anyhow, let's go to other economic indicators, restarting the discussion. And we have real GDP growth under various presidents: Obama's first term, Obama's second term, Trump pre-pandemic, Trump overall, and Biden through the fourth quarter.
Biden's now ahead. Woo! By 1/100%. Yeah, he's in the lead now. So,
And especially compared to Trump's full term of 2%, Trump's kind of in last place. But yeah, we don't count the pandemic against Trump. We don't count the real estate collapse against Bush. You know, we just,
we're Republicans. You guys don't know that on this call, but that's how we do this. That's how we sneak this stuff in.
yeah, because we're not going to count anything that shows up as negative on Republican presidents.
That's right.
They're just unlucky with the stuff they have to deal with.
That's right.
Because they all have recessions. But anyhow,
this one's just contributions. When people say, "Oh, it's all government deficits," that's why we've got good GDP growth. That's also baloney. This data is actually available in Fred, and you can see exactly what, and from the BLS too. You can see there, our BEA that does the GDP numbers, the Bureau of Economic Analysis. You can see the blue bar is much smaller than the black bar. The blue bar is the contribution to GDP from federal government spending, and the black bar is what that growth was in that actual quarter. So you can see it's generally a very small part of it. The way to think about it is, of course, having a large amount of government spending is contributing to GDP, but it's the change. If you're looking at the growth in GDP and how much of that growth is from the government spending, if you're looking for a change in GDP, that would be because of a change in government spending, and the government spending is just not changing all that much dramatically quarter to quarter in this type of data. So that's why it's just the government we have an almost $30 trillion economy. And if the government's spending a few $100 billion more in any given year, it isn't going to move the dial a ton on the GDP.
If you take it back another year or two into the big Trump spending years,
yeah,
it'll look bigger.
Yep.
But then we have to point out that spending was really high under Trump.
As Republicans, we're not about to do that.
And we wouldn't want to do that, but we might want to do that. Okay, inflation, and this is PCE inflation is the Fed's preferred method of. We're going to get the CPI inflation tomorrow or later this week, but PCE inflation comes out at the end of the month. So this is all February data. And what we see is that PCE inflation 12-month is under 3% for both core inflation and overall inflation. So it's getting close to the Fed's goal of 2%. And we see that inflation has generally been coming down, contrary to a large percentage of the population believes that inflation has gone up over the last year. Granted, that statistic this past week and went, huh? But it was a Wall Street Journal survey. So this is
inflation as the price level and not the rate of change. And so if the prices are higher, then inflation is worse. So that's just the way I think a lot of them think about it.
Yeah. And then this is the
title should just say CPI.
Yeah.
That's just the CPI.
What we see is that the CPI is higher than the change in the PCE, but it's still under 4% versus the 9.1% it reached back in the summer of 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine.
What you're seeing is gas prices starting to come back. And that's part of why this number, the CPI, all kind of bumped up the last month. I believe it was gas prices that did it. Rent has been consistently bad. And so now if gas prices start to go up, you'll see this number starting to go up. And it usually does during the summer, right, Karl? I mean, gas prices tend to go up in the summer.
They certainly do here with our, summer mix of fuel. for pollution control. But yeah, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, here we talk about the number of people who are insured versus uninsured. We see that when we passed the Affordable Care Act, we had almost 50 million people uninsured. Now, the Affordable Care Act really didn't kick in until 2014, although in some here in Cook County, expanded Medicaid kicked in 2013. But we see that the number of uninsured dropped, and then Trump took office, and the number of uninsured grew, and then Biden took office, and the number of uninsured declined. And then we also have, and I don't know how this handles it, Trump non-ACA policies that he allowed, because I've been reading about some people who bought those cheaper Trump era policies that don't cover what they needed to. But that's part of what's going on here. Okay, that may have been what happened in 2020. Trade deficit with China?
I can help here.
Sure.
So Trump put in a bunch of tariffs in 2018 to 2020, and they were mostly targeted at China to try to get rid of the trade deficit with China, theoretically, maybe for other reasons, but that was one of the stated reasons. And if you look at the trend kind of from 2018 to now, it's a downward trend, although there's some volatility in there where 2022 had popped back up. But it seems like in terms of have the tariffs reduced the trade deficit with China? The answer appears to be yes. Other things equal. And however, what happens with tariffs is tariffs are a tax on regular Americans. And they're a regressive tax. They make stuff we import from China more expensive. And so what happens typically is there's a company that imports the stuff. A U.S. company is importing that stuff and has to remit all that money to the Treasury, and they pass the cost along to the consumer in higher prices. It's simply the way it works. And so the trade deficit, though, if that's your goal, has come down. CBO estimates it cost families about $1,300 to put those tariffs in. Those tariffs, they may have punished China and that China couldn't export as much as they normally. China could not export to us as much. Our imports went down. On the other hand, it also cost us in more expensive stuff. It's inflation, although back then inflation was very low, and according to the CBO, it would have been even lower if we had not put in those tariffs. So that's just that box is a CBO excerpt, and you can see the sources there. But figure $1,200 a year in tariff costs, and Biden actually kept them. So I think he felt that the optics of this made sense. They were executive orders that he could have reversed, and he chose not to. So this has continued. This next slide just has the amount of of the tariffs. And so you can see in 2017 and before, we were collecting in that 30 to 40 billion range. And then since those tariffs have gone in, we've collected about almost twice or three times that amount, somewhere in the 75 to 100 range in the last few years. And that does reduce the government budget deficit. So again, a regressive tax that people are paying. That it shows up in the higher prices for the goods that people buy from Walmart and everybody else that imports cheap stuff from China. A lot of clothing as well. Clothing and toothpaste and all the goodies we get at Walmart are more expensive if we were importing them. Typically, corporations have been pretty good about finding alternatives, meaning we're still importing the stuff. We're just importing it from different countries. But still, we're still importing an awful lot from China because they are one of the largest, if not the largest, manufacturing operation on the planet. So in 2023, it was about $83 billion on average, somewhere in that range. So it's a significant chunk of change. I mean, no doubt about it. So this is a really interesting way of thinking about this idea of the vibe session, which has been less so lately, but for several months in the last quarter of 2023, it was everything. It was everybody who was talking about it on Twitter. The idea that the economy is way better than the consumer sentiment. The views of the economy were incredibly negative, still are, but the economic data is really, really good. So there's an interesting phenomenon here. Paul Krugman's been talking about this too. It's the idea that people are saying the economy is good locally and that their own personal circumstances are very good, but they're saying the U.S. economy is in bad shape. And that's very much a function of media and the social media and the the sort of choice of media consumption that people make is they read a lot of bad news on Fox or other places about the economy. When people ask them how are things in your state, the negativity is not associated with that, and they can answer more honestly. And so you see these really good indicators that in the swing states, at least, the economy is looked at better. But will that affect voter behavior? Unlikely, or maybe not, if people still think the U.S. economy stinks. It's just pointing out the internal inconsistency in people's brains, and that they like their local economy, but somehow the economy they don't experience, the national economy, is somehow bad. And again, that's media, which has done a horrible job in this whole thing, as you've heard from me many times if you've been to these sessions before. They can't explain the economy worth a darn, most of them. So Bill Pascrell's fun. He does a lot of great stuff on Twitter. I don't know who his intern is, but they're excellent. But the U.S. is the largest producer of crude oil in the world, and we were producing more than we ever have under Biden. So a constant refrain from Republicans on social media and in the news is always, Biden's sabotaging the oil industry, this, that, and the other. It's like, no, not really. We're doing quite well in that department, and 2024 is expected to be more of the same.
Well, you remember his first month in office, oil production dropped.
That seems to be about it. So,
well,
a little longer, but
you remember it was really cold in Texas, and the Texas electric grid failed, which caused the crude oil production to drop. But that's a little detail that they tend to our Republican friends.
All right. Okay. So violent crime also is another common Republican talking point of how it's all chaos out there, and understand that trying to make people think the economy is doing badly, trying to make people think that crime is rampant and that there are crises of various kinds. I mean, that's all part of, Republicans being the not owning the presidency, wanting to win it. That's part of it, but it's also part of the authoritarian playbook of make the world seem like there's chaos and you need a strong man to fix it. You need a dictator to get in there and straighten everybody out. Well, again, kind of like the oil lie, here's the truth about crime, which violent crime is down. The violent crime rate is falling. This is per 100,000 population, has been falling from that 2020 peak, has been falling every year under Biden. And we don't have the 2023 final data yet, so this is an estimate based on sort of a percentage drop since the prior quarter. We don't have the full year yet, but assuming that is the full 2023 year estimate, we're down at about 350 violent crimes per 100,000, down from more like 400 under Trump in 2020 during the pandemic. So it seems like everybody that went outside was a criminal back in 2020 during the pandemic, but now we're getting back to normal. And there's a list at the bottom that explains kind of some of the caveats here. All right, so we've got a couple charts left here. You've seen these before. These are the comparisons of 2023 to 2019. So we got the fourth quarter the net worth data. So we could update that, and the stock market, most of the other data we already had for the full year. But this one, they were still doing revisions to the jobs. I think this is final now. It was 251 is the final, but it was mostly the real net worth numbers that came in, and we were able to get averages for that. And again, 2023, even adjusted for inflation, is better than 2019 on nearly every measure. Measures that always go up, like GDP overall or number of jobs, note that those are not on here. Meaning these are sort of per household, per capita, or rates like unemployment and job creation rate, which fluctuate up and down. So it isn't like everything should be better than 2019 because some years have elapsed. You could probably argue that for the stock market is pretty typical to go up year over year, but these other numbers are all to Biden's credit. They don't always go up. Again, the net worth of the bottom 50% got wiped out after the Great Recession. It went down. So it's come back dramatically, and it hit a record in 2022, so as we covered earlier. So lots of great information here. You can't just dismiss this saying, oh, but 4 years have elapsed. Of course, it's better. It's just not true. And then also it's adjusted for inflation. People will attack it based on that. There's two big numbers that were better in 2019. And there may be a third, depending on when we get the data for 2023. The Poverty rate was slightly lower in 2019. The budget deficit was lower, as you would expect. It grows over time, but still it was lower. And then also we don't have the data until September, but real median household income, which is a really good measure, was better in 2019 than 2022. We'll see where that shows up in 2023. It should hopefully go back the other direction with all the big wage gains that we've seen. But, we'll see. Also, there was a giant increase in the number of households in 2022. That's the denominator, real median household income. You have a big jump in the number of households that would tend to lower or lower that figure, other things equal. We didn't have a big increase in households in 2023, so that's going to help when we see that number. I think the next one is just with 2022. Nope, this is the bill slide. So we took some of these. It looks better in the PowerPoint slide. Sometimes when you do we convert this stuff to a PDF, it throws off the lines. The PowerPoint slide looks clean, but it's all the numbers are better. This is just the same chart you just saw, only in this format, just for the key numbers. And then here's the same chart again, but with 2022 also in there. And in 2022, all the numbers were also better than 2019, even adjusted for inflation. And in fact, the net worth numbers were the highest in 2022. They've actually come down into 2023, but are still well above the pre-pandemic. So when the media beats up on this economy, or people say this economy stinks, blah, 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 understand that's mostly a question of the media that they've been getting hit with. They're not armed with the facts the way you guys are that come to these meetings and see all this information. The normal person thinks real wages are down under Biden. They don't understand about that giant phony peak in 2020. They just hear the media saying real wages are down. And also they hear real wages are down, a little bit, or real wages are, and they may even hear real wages are up a little bit. They don't understand that that's adjusted for inflation. And so, and they'll say, well, real wages are up 2%, but costs are up 30. It's like, no, that's not how real works. There's all these translation issues that you have to fight with. And that's part of why the media struggles to do this. They don't put a table like this on their website that's there for people to go look at 24/7 if they want to see it. It just boggles my mind that they just won't do it. I've showed this chart to just about every anybody that follows me on Twitter knows I do this chart practically daily, sometimes multiple times in different locations. Every journalist, I guarantee you, every economics journalist has seen this chart. And some of them have commented back to me on it. I mean, they have seen it and they just don't put it in their paper. And part of it was they sell when they talk crisis. They use that word crisis and people start reading, they click. So I think Karl was trying to show the last slide, which is just some links that you can use to get at some useful articles and information that doesn't get old, like the economy doing better under Democratic presidents. It's been true going back all the way to the Second World War. So you can see studies on this or articles on this that are a year or two old. The data is even going to look better when you include Biden. The only thing that's going to look worse with Biden is probably going to be like average deficit level or something like that. But to Karl's point earlier, if you look at where the deficit was when he started to now, huge reduction in the deficit under Biden, but still in terms of the size of the budget deficit, he's going to make Democrats, it's going to weigh Democrats down. But in terms of growth, job creation, inflation, obviously not going to help, but wage gains, wage level, net worth, all that stuff is going to look way better. Biden's going to be adding to the Democratic lead on many of these measures.